This week, I've been telling the story of a student-led resistance out of Munich during the Second World War. We commonly call them the White Rose. While you can find a playlist filled with videos about Hans Schull and Alexander Schmorell, this week we're going through the story using women who had an impact on the group, and not all of them had a positive impact. Today we're talking about Gisela Schörtling. This is the only picture I can find of her, so... During the Second World War in Germany, there was this thing called the Reich Labor Service. It was basically a law requiring all young Germans to serve in some way towards the military effort. And this is how she came to know and befriend Sophie Scholl. Now, unlike the other women I've talked about in this series, Gisela didn't have any opposition to the National Socialist Party. In fact, she was loyal to it. Her father was a newspaper publisher, and his newspaper became a National Socialist paper. He was a member of the SS as well as the Nazi Party. Her mother was also a leader in the National Socialist Women's League. Gisela was in full knowledge of what the party was doing and either supported it or was indifferent. Which is why it was shocking and appalling to Hans Schull's group of friends when in December of 1942 he decides to start dating Gisela. Sophie Scholl had actually invited Gisela to come study in Munich. She had been the one encouraging her to move universities. When Hans, Alex, and the rest of the student company returned from the Eastern Front in 1942, Gisela found Hans to be quite attractive and poetic, and so they started dating. And I know what you're thinking. Hans Schull was the head of a resistance, anti-Nazi resistance. How can he date a Nazi? Great question. Nobody knows. Hans struggled deeply with his sexuality. He struggled mentally as well. Girls pretty carelessly, but unlike he had like an actual emotional and intellectual connection, Gisela was just there to be his girlfriend. And early in 1942, she became a hot topic within the group, because Hans had been quite shameless about showing her the resistance work, inviting her to their meetings where they would say treasonous things, knowing full well where her ideologies lied and almost daring her to do something about it. According to Gisela, she did not like that Hans was showing her all of this. It made her very uncomfortable and very upset as well because, But she said she couldn't call things off with Hans for two reasons. One, he had promised to marry her. An engagement was not announced, but apparently he had made some private promise. And two, he threatened to harm himself if she broke up with him because of his quickly deteriorating mental state. Especially after returning from the Eastern Front, she believed him. This all came to bubble over around February 12th, when Hans invited Gisela to what was meant to be a private meeting between him and other members of the group. Members, as in that circle of friends who were involved in the activities. Her presence in that room crossed a line for Willy Graf, certainly for Trautele friends, Christoph Probst, and tragically also for Alexander Schmorell, who after that meeting seemed fairly resigned to run away to Russia. Now the group agreed to go through with one last distribution campaign, which would take place on February 18th. Hans and Sophie Scholl had agreed to take a suitcase full of leaflets early in the morning and distribute them at the university. And where Hans had kind of half-heartedly hidden some of the White Rose stuff so that he would sit Gisela in one room and go into his bedroom with Alexander Schmorell and very clearly be typing out stuff. So he concealed his effort. But at this point he straight up told her that he planned on distributing the leaflets. In fact, many people who met with the Scholl siblings the 17th and 18th felt that there was some sort of finality to that meeting. The morning of February 18th, Gisela is going to a lecture by Professor Kurt Huber. Kurt Huber is also involved with the leaflet campaign. While Gisela is in that lecture, Hans and Sophie Scholl are out in the atrium of the university, scattering stacks of leaflets. Only a few moments before the lecture is dismissed, Sophie Scholl takes a large stack of leaflets sitting on a third-floor balcony. There was a balcony, and then below the balcony was the atrium area. She pushes the stack of leaflets off the balcony so that they fall and they scatter across the floor. A janitor on the lower level sees this happening and is able to catch her and Hans Scholl. This is as students are actively leaving the lecture. As Hans and Sophie are being dragged away into this temporary detention center, it was like an office in the school. Hans turns to Gisela and he says, "If you see Alex at home, tell him not to wait up for me." Apparently Gisela tried to get to Hans's apartment but didn't make it there before the Gestapo did. Gisela was arrested on February 18th and taken in for questioning. While the Scholl siblings faced this famous interrogation and trial, Gisela was telling the Gestapo everything. On February 22, 1943, Hans Scholl, Sophie Scholl, and Christoph Probst were put on trial for the treasonous leaflet. The trial was really for show, and the judge had already decided the verdict. That very same day, Hans, Sophie, and Christoph were all beheaded. 2 days later, by her own conviction, Gisela went to the Gestapo and gave a statement which incriminated herself as well as many others. Gisela's father obtained a lawyer for her. On April 5th, she was officially arrested. On April 19th, Gisela faced trial alongside 13 other people who had been accused of helping the leaflet campaign. There with her was Alexander Schmorell, her professor Kurt Huber, Willy Graf, and Traute Lefrenz. At the end of that trial, Gisela was sentenced to 1 year in prison for failure to report treasonous activities earlier, and 3 more people were sentenced to death: Alexander Schmorell, Kurt Huber, and Willy Graf. Whereas most of these friends tried to protect each other, Gisela did not. Her statement certainly led to those sentences. Now, in 2026, Gisela is rarely included in the story of the White Rose. Often she's like Hans's girlfriend who nobody likes. And everybody's like, oh, that's a girlfriend who nobody likes. But her actions had a big impact, and today her statements, though they criminalized her own friends, are kind of the only, statements that we know are super accurate. Because as where everybody else was lying for each other, Gisela was not. Historians looking for specific dates, knowing exactly what was talked about, knowing how the treason was carried out, they go to Gisela's statements. And while Lilo and Traute also wrote down their memories, what Gisela is saying is from only a few days after the happenings, It's fresh in her mind. And it's a tragically trustworthy account. Now, the story doesn't end here, and tomorrow we're going to be talking about Inge Scholl.